Test one, two, three. Making you go, aren't they?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. We'll officially call this meeting to order at 1:10. Appreciate everyone being here. The first order of business I'd like to do is call on Ms. Leanne Franklin to please come up and give her invocation. If you'd please join me in a pledge of allegiance, I'd appreciate it. Ms. Franklin.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
We'll pray first. We appreciate y'all's enthusiasm. That's really nice.
If you,
I thought y'all were standing for me. I was enjoying that moment.
I've lost control. We haven't even started this meeting. Leanne, go right ahead. Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here this afternoon. Thank you for everyone for being here. And I just want to take this moment and pause and celebrate and look back, not too far back, but just to last week. A lot happened last week. It was Nurses Week, and we got to celebrate how many nurses, Wanda? 2,400 nurses who give their absolute best every day and every night, and the chance to celebrate them and to see how leadership celebrates our nurses. Such a privilege, so well done. Last week we also got to unveil the new Oncology and Infusion Center and see all the joy, the hope, the promise of this state-of-the-art facility that it's going to just do so much for our community. And in the midst of all this, we had Code Yellow. So we were seeing more patients than ever before, and here's what happened. Everybody was at their absolute best. Didn't miss a beat. Every patient, every family member, no matter where they were within the network, they saw us at our best. And so I just am filled with so much gratitude and so many thanks for how everybody comes together, because when the pressure's on, when it's harder than the hard, then we just do what we need to do, and we do it with grace and with so much compassion and care, because it's who we are and it's what we do. So thank you to everyone in this room who helps that to happen. With that, let us pray. We come together knowing that it's not going to get easier, that the storms are going to keep coming, that the yellows are going to still being coded here, and that we're going to continue to see more and more need. But that's okay, because we have this infrastructure in place that lets us deliver every single time. So we ask that you continue to give us every single thing we need to respond with grace and care and compassion, to anticipate needs, to plan for needs, so that we can every single time be our best for our patients, our families, and for all the communities we serve. Thank you for everyone in this room and the part that each plays in helping us to continue to be great. All this we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
That's our dental center.
I've been advised there are no citizens to address the board today, and so we will move along to item number 4, which is the copy of the minutes of the April 11th meeting, which had been forwarded previously. If there's any discussion, I'd be glad to entertain it. I would make one comment in those minutes. It refers to a questionnaire that we anticipate to have gotten to you by now. It is being worked on. That questionnaire to ask y'all some things about, obviously, if we have a retreat, anything that has to do with post-bond, which Robert will update everyone on later, so that will be forthcoming. It is in the minutes. But other than that, if there's no other discussion, we have a motion for approval. Second by Mr. Zimmerman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you so very much. Item number 5. I'll just say 2 things. Leanne, I always love the way you make your presentation, and I'm so glad I get to do the pledge following you, because I'd hate to try to have to just start talking. You do such a marvelous job. You did mention the Code Yellow on behalf of this board, and I will note all 11 board members were here today, and with all the busy schedules, I appreciate everybody being here. You mentioned Code Yellow. I was in the hospital a couple times this week. I'd never seen the top floor of the garage in all the years I've come to the hospital. And because we were so busy and staffs were so busy, on behalf of the board, I want to express a special thank you to everyone, Robert, for the leadership and the people in this district. Actually, a person picked me up on the 4th floor that's picked up a lot of people. And they said, well, you probably hear in the golf carts a lot. And I said, I don't play golf, but you'd provided assistance for people that were parked in the garage. So again, a lot of stuff goes on. A lot of people don't know. Code Yellow, we know how important it is and how busy you are. So thank y'all very much. The other thing is, as part of my comments, 2 other issues. One is I get to sit here each month and tell you about all the things I attend. I'm not going to do that today. Sometimes I steal Robert's thunder. My gosh, you mentioned the opening of the cancer. What a phenomenal. I thank the board members. I believe 5 of you were there, even after we'd had a planning and a finance committee. And Robert so noted that in his opening comments at that presentation. I thank y'all very much for being there. We've also had our excellence in nursing. I know Robert will want to make a few comments there, so I'm going to leave those for him. But again, I thank all the board members who participate. One I did get to participate in addition to those, is we just recently had the Dallas-Fort Worth Hospital Council. This is all the health care in the area. We had 3 phenomenal individuals that were nominated for Employees of the Year, Heather Scroggins, Hugo Cantu, and Dr. Richard Teams. So again, a continuation of our people doing remarkable work and being recognized in the community. And other than that, I thank y'all all for being here. And Robert, I'll move it to you at this time.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple things to the chair's point. We did have Nursing Week. And Nursing Week is one of those special times for us, just like Hospital Week and many other department celebrations that we have, is to celebrate the good work that people do. And when you have over 2,400 nurses working at a facility, they're such a significant part of the healthcare delivery system, it's powerful. One of your colleagues presented our keynote address, and Amanda did an incredibly good job, and we appreciate you being here and doing that. And she had us laughing, and she had us understanding the sincerity of what it's like that she went through with her mother being here and the powerful role that nurses play. And it was a really nice speech, so we appreciate that. Y'all stay tuned, because there's still a few of you on this board that have not given this speech, so be ready, because you will ultimately be asked to do that, hopefully, because you're board members and you do such a good job, and you represent a side that our nurses need to see and know. And I also want to thank Mr. Zimmerman and Pastor for coming, because your attendance at those mean a lot to the team and the staff, and it is very helpful and greatly appreciated. So thank you, and we know how tough schedules can be. To the same, thanks to those of you who attended the Oncology and Infusion Center. That was a really well-attended event. We had a nice turnout of both physicians, cancer patients, community leaders, you as board members. You all, when you came into the board meeting today, saw a lot of pictures of that ceremony, and that was a really nice ceremony. And the greatest thing is it doubles our space, gives us 51,000 square feet of space to provide care to people who hopefully we can not only extend their life, we can make their lives better when they are told that you have cancer. And I've always mentioned that cancer is a battle that we would rather fight in the first round than the 12th round. And if we get it in the first round, we got a really good chance of a knockout. 12th round makes it just more challenging, but we'll take that on too. But if we can reduce the number of people that have stage 4 cancer by what we do in our primary care settings and what we're doing to get advance of that, that's going to be a huge contribution that JPS brings to this. The other thing that was exciting was our partnership with the Moncrief UT Southwest Cancer Center and what we're doing there. And then we also had nice turnout from Baylor administration. The ground is owned by Baylor that the building sits on, but there's also a conduit or a tunnel between the two, between Baylor and that building, and that may well serve as a nice way to bring patients over to the cancer center. Yeah.
I thought you were just kidding.
No, there is an actual tunnel. There's an actual tunnel between the two, and myself and the CEO, Mike Sanborn, have talked a lot about a partnership that we hope to develop with Baylor All Saints, Scott and White, to try to figure out how to provide care and services, because the people that we have in that building and the equipment that we have in that building are state-of-the-art in both categories. So I'm looking forward to the continued growth of that, and very appreciative that this board gave us as staff the direction to do that. In my contribution to Pastor Emerson and a few others of you, this will be the best that I have as a Christmas gift to you. This is an org chart. Now, I will tell you that this org chart is organic in its nature. So what you see today could be a boxed move tomorrow. But this is let's call it an org chart in time. But just to give you all an idea of what we have and how we're sort of moving things with Dr. Hochberg's role and some of the changes that we've made, I wanted to give you all that. You can comment on if you want, but I want you to get some time to look through it, think through it, any comments that you have. We also have an org chart that we can take deeper as well, and we can go down into executive director level and director level, but I wanted you to have that available to you as well. As Leanne mentioned in her prayer regarding Code Yellow, it's been a challenging last week with the amount of people that came in to JPS, the amount of people that were coming both from our clinic side and to our emergency department side. The press reports and what our communications team did to alert people to the Code Yellow, I think was fantastic. But I think what y'all need to also realize was the cooperation that we got from the area hospitals. What we got from HCA and what we got from Baylor and THR and Methodist Mansfield was pretty unbelievable support. I called each one of the CEOs, and every one of them said, let us try to figure out how we can help JPS. And I was not only honored by that, it was a huge help to deal with not only a stressful situation, but at some point you get into safety issues when you have that large of a load coming through your emergency department. And that's very, very difficult. And so I appreciate the area hospitals helping out. The other thing is I do want to always thank the voters for passing the bond, but I also want to thank for the bond passage to the fact that we always have a larger audience at our board meetings now, thanks to the passage of the bond. So thank you all for your great interest in JPS. We appreciate it immensely. I'll also tell you that there is a process, and in that process, and it's probably good that you all are here so you can hear this, because I think after 6 months of a bond package, the question is, where are you going? Where's your buildings? And where's your architect? And why aren't we building? And I didn't see a bulldozer when I came into the parking garage. There are 2 skid steers out, but it's not quite a bulldozer. And I think what we need to do, and what we've tried to do by putting a committee in place, and it's an ad hoc committee, it's not a sophisticated committee, but it is an attempt to create a first look for this board and the Commissioners Court. So we asked Judge Whitley and Commissioner Brooks, and we've asked G.K. Manius to work with Mr. Petty and I from the Planning Committee standpoint to begin to look at some of the very preliminary aspects of this, and that is, should we have an RFP similar to what they've done in other counties in the nation to look at how they structure the go forward with a bond package? Because as I mentioned to y'all, if we just build buildings, we will make a huge mistake. It's the strategic approach to what goes in the buildings and what services and what type of priority list you put to those. And that priority list is going to be difficult because everybody is a photo finish for first and a priority. But you have to figure out your money and the smart use of it. So we have done some really good work, I think, and a lot of due diligence to finding other hospitals, both private, not-for-profit, and public settings that have passed recent bond packages that will give us a clue to the ways we should go in looking at how to do that. You don't want to bring on just a project manager to figure out how you manage your building growth. You really want to look at efficiencies so we can figure out how to pay the debt. You want to look at a priority basis to make sure that those buildings are being put in the right place. For example, you don't want to just put if the Blue Ribbon Committee calls for 4 clinics, you don't want to just put a clinic out there. You might want to put a clinic where you have your epicenter of geriatric care and have that focused on geriatrics care. Those kind of things are smart decisions for JPS. So I know that some of you in the audience may be saying, you know, where are you and where are you going? It's not only pragmatic, it's methodical, so that we're not in 1919 and 1920 the laughing stock for 30 years. And they go, why did those people do that? What a dumb decision, because you're not going to get bond packages that are going to pass every other year. So we got to be smart about how we spend the tax dollars' money, and we got to report to the community how well we're doing. So that committee is in place to do that and go through that process. So I wanted to at least let y'all know that being the case.
But before you go farther, can I ask a question?
You bet.
Where will the, we know we had the Boca Powell plan, and I forget the other company, the
Blue Cottage.
Blue Cottage.
Yes, sir.
And I know the Blue Ribbon Committee had recommendations. So how do we package that so that when the committee you just talked about, that team looks at it, are they going to, I guess I'm asking, what master plan or what,
You bet.
where's that we look at to move forward?
All of that really rolls into a lot of what the Blue Ribbon Committee had suggested, and that I think will be a nice foundation. For example, let me use the point I raised earlier about 4 clinics. The recommendation in the Blue Ribbon Committee is 4 clinics. So I think we should ask, is 4 the right number? And making sure that that is. And then not only that, but where should those 4 clinics be, and what services should be provided in those 4 clinics? So the Blue Ribbon Committee, I think, really sets a good foundation for us, and that will be a working off document for us to begin to look at. Then the work that we've done that have complemented the Blue Ribbon Committee, going back to Blue Cottage and the Boca Powell plan, what we do with ambulatory surgery. For example, we feel strongly that there should be an ambulatory surgery center, and what should go in it, in addition to some of our clinics and moving them off of our 2nd floor and moving them over there. And what kind of participation can we have from our doctors? Because if you get some kind of participation, it may make a difference in the amount of cost of it and what is being brought to the table. So I think if you go back to the Blue Ribbon Committee, it is still our basic foundation by which we'll pivot off of. So good question.
So what you're saying is there's this working group that you identified, and it'll work through the planning committee of this board, ultimately to come to us.
Yes, everything from that working group doesn't make decisions. They're just trying to help align matters so that we can come back to the board and the court and say, hey, we're going to put out an RFP, and this RFP is going to look at not only the project management of this, but it's going to look at the efficiency models and who we ought to look from a consulting standpoint to help us with efficiency before we build the first building.
Got it.
And nothing will be done unless it's approved by this board and approved by the court. And I think some are going to get antsy saying, well, is this working group going to be making these decisions? No. And your vernacular is even better than mine in that working group is probably a much better deal. And that is, every one of those issues you can't really bring back to this board because I think we'll paralyze the board. Yeah. Same thing with the court. But if we can begin to streamline that and come up with a document that might be an RFP, then we take it back to this board for its approval. And then it would go the same process in the court.
And both groups are getting the same communication.
Yes, both groups are getting the
So
same.
us having a meeting, they having a meeting, this way both groups, both the court and the board's getting the communication back to them.
Right.
Trent, thank you for serving. You've served on a lot, but thank you again for serving on this.
So, and you know, with the role Steve played on our Blue Ribbon Committee and the role that Trent played on our Blue Ribbon Committee, they'll be hugely helpful for the board because they were there in a lot of those preliminaries. And for those of you new members, I think both Steve, Dr. Simmons, and Trent Petty will be hugely helpful to y'all because they'll give you the history without you all having to go through every one of those stages of each one of those plans. Well, if you, just by osmosis,
Yeah,
it might help you, and that'll be good.
Get you moving along, Mr. CEO.
So I wanted to sort of go over that with you. The other thing that I want to mention to you is the structure that Neil and Adams and I are working on to try to figure out the role of a vice president of legal services at JPS, to try to figure out what we do in a growing organization and changes that are happening at JPS. And I want to thank Neil for not only his support, but his working approach to dealing with that as we try to figure out the answers for JPS from legal standpoints and where we're going on that. So thank you on that. I will have one item in closed that I would like to bring up to y'all's attention as well, but it deals with a real estate matter, and so I'll be dealing with that in closed. But Mr. Chair, that I believe is all I have. Yes, sir.
Robert, in regards to the code yellow last week, what was the cause? I mean, flu, is it?
No, and that's our challenge. That
Experience the same?
they were seeing numbers, but not quite as large as ours. One of the challenges that we are significantly having is voluntary site patients and involuntary site patients. Part of that may be the time, part of that may be Sundance facility closing down and having a private facility closed down and having more patients here. It may be that the police, law enforcement agencies, the complement to JPS might see us as being very efficient, and we get a larger supply of those patient base. But we got to a point where it was a challenge. That, Mr. Fisher, is our biggest challenge, in that we're scratching our heads trying to figure out why on Tuesday did we get 425 patients in our emergency room, and then why did we on Monday have half that? And the challenging case, as Chet knows from the ED side, is the amount of people that have a suicidal ideation and the one-on-one care that we need to provide to those individuals. And when you take a nurse off of one area and have them in a room with somebody who's in that delicate state, what that does to your staffing needs elsewhere. And that was our problem. There is not an answer to it. And problem is, we don't have any. We get the problem, and we've got to come up with the answer. So we asked our colleagues to help. And we are now going to continue to have meetings with the EPAB board, and we've already had meetings with the ground transport ambulance services to try to figure out the best equity for making sure patients are spread adequately throughout the county so that there's not one burden. Because if any one of the emergency rooms in Tarrant County were to close down, the effects it would have on everybody else would be devastating. That goes for us and anything we would do. And other counties deal with this in different ways. They have different procedures and guidelines. A lot of counties go on a divert process that we don't do here in Tarrant County, and we're not suggesting that we do that. We're all responsible. We think we can work it out as a group. Great question.
Any other comments for Robert? Again, Robert, thank you very much. You mentioned ED, and Dr. Schrader will take us to item number 7, a report from the Medical Executive Staff Committee. Dr. Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one matter of business to bring to the board. In your packets, the delineation of privileges for our ophthalmology providers under the Department of Surgery. The main change in the privilege is that corneal transplants have been moved under core privileges, as that is now become a core training component of the residency program. That was really the main issue we needed to clean up. And so with that, I'd entertain the consideration.
Any questions, Dr. Schrader? Would you entertain that as a motion? Dr. Schrader, is that what you're needing for the approval? Yes, sir. And I'd entertain a motion. I have a motion by Mrs. DeBose and a second by DT. I think you beat him. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Chet, thank you so very much. Which will take us to item number 8. And I'd ask Dr. Hotchberg to come up, and we will get a report from the acclaimed physician group. Michael, the floor is all yours. Chet, you really made him move back there in the back. I know what you did.
I can do a really good New York saunter in case anybody wants it.
Floor is all yours, Michael.
A few handful of updates. Next week, we have Greeley coming out to do some coaching and mentoring for our medical directors and our future leaders. This is really to begin to provide them the appropriate level and skill sets to manage their staff, managing their providers, to understand how to have difficult conversations with providers when they may not be performing the duties they should or shouldn't be doing. So this was the culmination of about 4 to 5 month program and discussion we had with Greeley in developing job descriptions and responsibilities and core elements of service that we want our medical directors, and again, as we go through succession planning, identifying those future leaders within our physician group as well. Along those same lines, our acclaimed physician board is working on developing a provider evaluation tool. This is one that would enable all our physicians and APPs to have a standardized process in which to determine their quality, their efficiency, how they work, all those elements there. And so this is a task that the physician board has taken on to try to achieve, to create that standardized 360 tool. Lastly, we have successfully completed our recruitment of our Director of Provider Recruitment and Compensation Planning. This is really to be a position that is not only geared towards the recruitment aspects of things, but also to review retention strategies, to also be partnering with Dr. Elliott in academic affairs to best understand how to retain our residents, as well as to work with Wanda in understanding how to retain our nurses who transition over to APPs, and also ultimately to be heavily involved in strategic planning in and around compensation, certainly as we begin to look at the next iteration of our compensation plan, particularly with a very strong focus on quality outcomes.
Any questions for Dr. Holbridge? Anything else from the chair? Michael, it sounds like you covered everything.
Great.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Which will now take us down to our committee reports. And of course, they obviously don't fall just because of the first, but we'll call on Mr. Steve Montgomery, Chair of Finance. Steve?
Mr. Chairman, we had a finance committee on April 25th. Very, very well-run committee hearing.
Yes.
Probably
Yes.
the best in the history of JPS.
I was there, and we spent,
Pretty
yeah, I
dynamic.
was there, and we spent more time talking about how great a meeting it was.
Well,
than presenting
you know,
it.
The fact that you have to tell us
Yes,
is a
moving right
sign.
along.
Could be there, so
Yes.
I want to make sure they heard it.
There were
So, but
several
it was,
Yeah.
oh, it's not about me. It's not about me.
Yes, if you'd have been
But
there,
no, I am the
you were
chair.
there.
So it was actually a very good meeting. We got the March financials presented by Ms. Clark, and we also passed several contracts for your consideration and consent. We also renewed, or we're recommending to the board that we renew our relationship with our foundation, the agreement we have there. And Ms. Clark is here to address our financials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, so for March, I'm going to cover this again at a very high level. We went into some detail back a couple of weeks ago at Finance. But as a reminder, the hospital, when we compare the volumes to budget, they were a little low, about 3% lower than we thought we were going to be. The revenue was actually down about $3 million. You can see there we came in at $83.5 million, but we were also about $3.9 million under in expenses. So we finished the year at about, or the month at about $1.5 million compared to a $691,000 budget, which was favorable. The Acclaim Physician Network, they came in about $78,000 under their budgeted loss, so that was favorable. And when we look at the year-to-date, you can see the medical center is about $6.1 million ahead of their budget with an income from operations of $10 million. The Acclaim Physician Group is actually about $1.8 million ahead of their budget for the year. And if you go to the very right column, you can see that a consolidated basis, we're actually breaking even at about $354,000, which is much ahead of our budget, which was a loss of 7.9. When you add our interest earnings to that, our net income for the first 6 months of our fiscal year is just over 9.7 million. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you.
And this is mid-year, right? This is 6 months.
Yes.
This is mid-year,
Yep.
6 months.
Any questions for Sharon? Sharon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do you have anything else to add at this time?
But thanks for asking.
Yeah. We will then pass finance, we will head now for, excuse me, go ahead, Ralph.
When Steve gave his report, he talked about the relationship between the foundation and the board.
Right.
I'd like to know if there's somewhere we can maybe, that could be an item to discuss in board meeting on the agenda on what we see is really the function of the foundation and funding request. I don't know a better term.
Right.
Okay. And I can talk further later, but I just want to kind of wash that out to just as a protection for the board.
Be glad to do that. In fact, as you know, the foundation report rolls up through, is consolidated through the hospital district, and we've got a complete budget for that. We'll make a special note to do that, Ralph. It's a good point. And DT still serves as our liaison between this board and the foundation board also. So he is our representative on that board. So we will certainly note that and do that. Which brings us now to governance. Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The very lovely members of the governance committee, with the exception of Dr. Weber, and talented members, no exception of Dr. Weber, met on the 25th of April. For your consideration today in the consent agenda is three procedures, IM 100 and then the archival of IM 200 and 300. Basically, in the board portal, you'll notice 2 and 300 were morphed into 100 and gives our IT staff a little bit more flexibility with an incoming threat and gives them some more immediacy versus coming back to the board. So, nothing further.
Any questions for Chairman Fisher? If not, thank you very much, Roger. Which brings us now to quality, to Dr. Weber. And that meeting was on May the 2nd. As I said, we had that meeting, and then we had planning, and then we had the opening. So it was a busy day. So all yours, Chuck.
At the committee, there were no policies to be reviewed this occasion. There were two presentations. One was the patient experience update, and that came from Laura Burnside, who's the Senior Vice President, Chief Experience Officer / Strategy. And I'll come back to that one in a second. And then the PS 190 update was from Dr. Rob Stevenson, who's the Vice President and Chief Quality Officer. Both presentations were good, informative, but at Ralph's suggestion, and I agree with this, was both of these are a little complicated and a little bit hard to understand if you don't sort of live it fairly frequently. So what I was thinking about doing was maybe starting a quality meeting of maybe a half hour early, serve lunch, but have the focus just on these two things, just for everybody's education. Because I firmly believe that quality from everybody is what drives finances. Sharon will disagree with me. But it's the essence of what we do as physicians, nurses, et cetera, et cetera. So that's it for me.
And we will so advise, Chuck had mentioned that earlier, and I think that's a great idea. And if it takes more than 30 minutes, we can always have another one later.
Yep.
But we think we'll do that. The next quality meeting is what you're, and we'll make sure, Suzanne, that we advise and prepare for that and get notice out. So is there any other questions for Dr. Weber?
Will there be cookies?
I'll let the chair of that committee determine that.
Probably so.
You know, I commented earlier about how nice it was to have all 11 of you here. I seem to have more trouble with all 11 of you here. Moving right along to planning, item number D, I will call on Mr. Petty. Trent?
Lowly and humble as we are, we did meet. Only to aspire to the greatness of finance someday.
Yes.
Our committee,
Eat today.
we did have one fun item that I want to report on it that you all will be seeing soon after it goes to finance, and that is to render an opinion on moving forward the Architectural Services Committee for the campus element of the Ambulatory Service Center. So that's a neat project that's been part of Blue Cottage, part of Boca Powell, part of everything we've been working on for the past decade. And it's nice to see that thing now moving to the point that we can actually look at it in the context of this campus and what it's ultimately going to be. And we're not ready to build it yet, but we are taking the first step. So we're happy to push that on to finance and ultimately back to the board. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Chairman Petty? It was nice to see.
Well, process.
Moving right along, but it was, you're right, Trent, it's great to see all those, and Ralph, you brought it up earlier about the Boca Pals and the Blue Cottage and, trips and a lot of things that went in long before the Citizens Blue Ribbon. It's nice to finally see all of, piece of this, piece of that, but it's all coming together now, the framework. So anyway, comments from them. Takes us down to item number 10. We will consider for approval, the item number A, approval of the second amendment to the professional services contract. Mr. Whitman?
That'll actually be
You- Okay, all righty.
the balance of your time.
Yeah. Welcome back, Michael. We'll get you a chair closer next month.
Yeah.
So I asked for consideration and approval of our annual professional services agreement between JPS and Acclaim. This represents those services for various medical directorships, chair, call agreements. The only material change is the addition of approximately $4 million relative to correctional medicine and dental services, which now are under the Acclaim umbrella. It is essentially a movement of those services over from the hospital budget to the Acclaim budget.
Reverend Emerson.
There's a need to approve this today.
So this has been, these are services that we currently contract, that we provide, and then get passed through to our various providers. So it's for call coverage, for various leadership positions. So those are duties that are currently being performed by our physicians and our providers.
Because I understand, I recognize that as I look at the document that explains what's taking place. What I would ask is, what is the diversity breakout for Acclaim? I'm not asking you that now.
Right.
But I would like to see that.
Sure.
Also, for the edification of you board members, this went through the executive committee of Acclaim. Your question is a good question, and we'll definitely deal with that. But also, you're getting it as it went through the process of the executive committee of Acclaim, and now it's coming to the full board, which all issues of Acclaim do.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, let me explain. The reason I ask that is because I'm a broken record right now. Because I keep saying that we check blocks we shouldn't check. And on the diversity area, we check goods and services obtained on this contract are part of an excluded category, okay? But I submit that it addresses the diversity breakout for JPS. And I think that block needs to be checked, and that it shows, so to show as a part of what the diversity is at the hospital. And sometimes I'm concerned that we just do stuff out of habit.
Absolutely. We'll get that to you. And look, I'm a big believer that your staff, your physicians need to also be, represent the patient population that you serve, simply from the very fact of, you understand those cultural differences. You even understand your diet relative to culture. So we can definitely get you those numbers and results.
And I think, Pastor, to your point, it will actually help us. And your suggestion is one It puts better statistics behind JPS because we're probably routinely not clicking boxes or clicking boxes we shouldn't, and it would add to the bottom line of our diversity effort, and we're not telling a true, full story.
Right.
So to your point, it should mirror our patient base, but to the pastor's point, it will show what JPS is doing, and in some categories, we probably don't display that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pastor.
Yeah, I think the point's well made, Ralph, thank you.
Procedurally, does that then go back to governance as a recommendation for an amendment to policy and procedures?
Well, it actually should have been filled out as part of the form. I think Ralph's contention is.
We're not filling the form
We're
out
not
right,
filling the
not that
form
the
out
form's
right.
not there.
The policy and procedures probably would have corrected that. I think here it went through claim.
Claim, yeah.
They should have added that to it. Yes,
I
Dr.
believe that when we go back and look at that, diversity group was looking at that form, and maybe that should be the one that looks at that, because a part of that was they went with some state that they used that form, so maybe that is the body that need to go back and look to see what we should and should not have, because we'd asked some other questions about, are we penalizing ourselves by having 25% overall in some areas we need to. So I believe that question, all of this should go back through diversity. I think I see Michelle now, y'all were
Michelle's
working
back
on
there,
that.
but yes. I totally agree.
I think you're right, and I agree with it. I'm just
Right.
saying that procedurally, I think the current policies and procedures exempt that as a
They are. They are excluded,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
it goes through an HR.
send it back to
Yeah,
Right.
diversity and then ultimately to governance.
That's
So
correct.
we get the policy amended and bring it back so we can fix it.
Correct. Okay.
Point made.
we can do
I'd
that.
like to recommend we approve Michael's presentation, with due
understand.
respect that
Had nothing to
And
do
I'm
with
not,
what we
and
asking.
I wasn't putting it on the floor
Yeah,
no.
to disapprove. It's just that, if anything, check both boxes. It's an excluded class, but also it meets our 25%. Okay, so.
Which I think is going to better reflect, I think the point's well made. I think it's going to better reflect when a claim presents those numbers. I think it's a win-win. I think probably when it went through was looked at more from financial standpoint as you were moving from one side to the other. But I think the diversity issue is well made, Ralph. We'll go back through diversity and we'll make sure Trinity goes back in governance, make sure it's in adherence with policy. There being no other discussion in reference to that, do we have a motion as it sits? You have a motion?
I'm gonna second his motion.
Got a motion by Dr. Weber, second by Reverend Emerson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Michael, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it, thank you. Item number B is approval and ratification of Mr. Early as president of the Tarrant County Outside Medical Service between the Tarrant County Hospital District and JPS Health. Mason Springs is Zelia here, I don't.
Yeah, Z is
There she
here.
is, she's behind the podium back there. Dr. Balker, come on up. Good afternoon.
We'll let you sit at the table.
Yeah,
Good afternoon.
good afternoon, Zee.
The agreement before you is for us to be able to contract with Mesa Springs, which is a freestanding psychiatric hospital that treats adolescents and adults. Right now, we have one main hospital that we utilize for outside medical service agreements, and allowing us to contract with Mesa Springs will give us other options for our patients to go to. The outside medical service agreement contracts are for individuals that are waiting in our psychiatric emergency center for admission, and we are at capacity at Trinity Springs, and we do not have the capability to move them to an inpatient bed in a timely manner. And so that would be the purpose of this contract.
Yeah, and let me comment, you've got approval and ratification of Robert Early executing this agreement as well as item C. Part of this is related to the Code Yellow, which
Yes.
led to the overcrowding. Mesa's not new to the organization. We've contracted with them in the past. And so that's the reason, because there was an emergency that had to be dealt with. You're ratifying and you're approving and ratifying the fact that Robert has already executed this contract and met a need that really was, and we don't do this often, and so in this case, it was necessary in order to meet the patient demand.
Yeah, and to Neil's point, the reason this is here and I have the authority is because when we get in adverse times like a code yellow, we have to look at all possible options that we have to move patients. And that gives us the flexibility during a code yellow when we call one to be able to look at any and all options, particularly in the area of psych patients, because that tends to be our more volatile and our more challenging population.
Any questions regarding item B? If not,
If I may, just on this, and tell you this,
Yes, sir.
on these kinds of deals, do we typically get, this is gonna be a dumb question, but I'll ask it anyway, like market rates, I mean, when they, they know we're sort of in a tight spot, I mean, are we,
And this contract is for a daily per diem of
Okay.
$6.25 a day, which is an excellent rate.
okay,
And then we also have case management, monitoring these patients. So we monitor for clinical quality as well as length of stay while they're utilizing these beds, so that everything is tightly monitored.
They're merely a backup too,
Right,
as
right.
the load regresses, then it comes back to the hospital too, so.
thank you.
You're welcome.
any other questions? If not, I entertain a motion on item number B. I have a motion by Mrs. DeBose, a second by Mr. Patty. All those in favor say aye.
And Mr. Chairman, let me comment on the next one. This particular contract is a work in progress. Still some issues we're working out with THR legally. Hopefully, in fact, we have a meeting on that, a conference call on that tomorrow. What I would ask here is approval, give Robert Early the authority to complete that negotiation with my input as general counsel and execute that contract.
Is there any discussion regarding this one? If not, I would entertain a motion with that added to it, with that slight modification. Is there any discussion in reference to this one?
Let me make sure I understand. The one that has the blank page, that's what you want me to
Yes,
do?
yes. I don't have the contract.
So it's just authority.
You're giving
for
Robert the
them move
authority to
forward
complete that
negotiate.
negotiation and then execute it because of the same very reason. Because that gives the hospital two different options in terms of outside services.
Actually,
on that.
more than even two, because this is for, I believe, 5 THR facilities that have inpatient
Exactly, yeah. It's not just one
psychiatric units.
facility. Yeah.
Correct.
Or various facilities.
It's the same as the Mesa Springs contract.
Yes.
It is,
It's just for
yeah.
the THR facilities.
Pricing the same.
And I won't,
is the same.
price
Yeah,
is
the price is the same, it's just some legal issues we're working out.
And I won't, this is not to be done without the direct communication and approval of general counsel.
Okay. All
I have a motion by
Second.
Mr. Fisher. I have a second by Mrs. DeBose. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Thank y'all very much. Zia, thank you very
I'm
much.
gonna go behind the podium again.
Thank you very much. Item number D, approval and ratification. Robert Early is President and CEO of the Tarrant County Hospital District. Executing agreement between the Tarrant County Hospital District and Tarrant JPS Health Network and Security. Ken? Mr. Carr? Kenneth? Good afternoon.
So carry the theme forward. This is for your consideration. This will be utilized during code yellows as well as other unforeseen circumstances, as we may need additional security resources to supplement our current PD services. And it's always nice to have this as a plan B, and we would only utilize it when it is absolutely necessary.
Kenny, now you're done with your presentation. Would you hit that mic switch on? There you go.
It,
There you go.
it is on.
Now people can hear what you're not saying. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Everybody hear me? I'm sorry.
Any questions?
So is this just for patrol or is this the golf carts too? Is-
Yeah.
Well, sir, that's a great question, because what we actually did was we were actually the ones running the golf carts, and so we needed our other PD in different areas, especially in the ED, to monitor some doors and some exits. And so what we did was we contracted with, currently, we're utilizing this company for the golf carts so that we can deploy our police department in other more critical
Okay.
areas.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, good question.
Good deal. Any more?
The golf carts are just to help people in transporting out of, with the oversaturation that we have, helping them move from spot A to spot B. And these 3 items that you see here are as a result of Code Yellow. These are out of the ordinary only because of Code Yellow and the extreme nature in which we get into when we're there.
So they don't have policing powers.
That is correct.
Yes.
They do not.
total of 4 or just 2? How many? How many are you requesting?
Well, so this is an agreement just with them, so we can request it,
As you need.
whatever we
Right.
need. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
As needed.
All right.
Good
Okay.
question.
All right.
Yeah, they're as needed, right, Ken?
Yes, sir.
They meet all of our standard bond and all that stuff, insurance.
DT,
Do they meet standard bonds and legal responsibilities? And the answer to that is,
the legal counsel as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Put yours back. Here, right there. 'Cause you always turn
we're here for
Yeah.
the golf for you guys.
Good.
You bet. Even when we're not in code yellow, keep them running.
I have a motion by Mr. Montgomery for approval. I have a second by Mr. D.T. Wynn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ken, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Peoples, Wanda, I can always see you're thinking ahead. You're all ready to come on up here and get started. So consider approval of district policy PC 1900, emergency medical treatment and active labor. Good afternoon, Wanda.
Good afternoon.
have to explain that one.
I am here this afternoon to ask your permission for the revision of Patient Care Policy 1900, our Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, which is our EMTALA policy. This has been an existing policy, and it's just the revision. It's primarily semantics, just capitalizations, grammatical changes, no real changes to the policy.
And you also have, for your information, but not approval, the administrative reg that follows with PC 1901.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Move approval.
Move approval.
Have a motion by Mrs. DeBose, second by Reverend Emerson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you very much. Wanda, thank you very much. Which would now bring us to item number 11, which is the consent agenda, which has been provided. Yes.
Before we go to the consent agenda,
Yes.
I just have a question on the items we just approved on the security and Mesa Springs. Because I know we addressed, those items were present because Code Yellow put us in a situation. So by approving this, does this now allow us, when another situation arises, we don't have to come back to, staff doesn't have to come back to the board to get reapproval?
Not on contracts. Contracts, if you're trying to address an issue through an outside vendor and you have to contract with them, then we have the same issue as like Mason, that the policy doesn't eliminate that necessity.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just trying to save us some work.
But it would-
Nice try. but
Nice
no.
try, Ralph, but it would have to come back through. But good point. Again, back on consent agenda, there being no other questions prior to consent. Are there any questions regarding consent? I know they've all been provided previously. There being no discussion, I have a motion by Reverend Emerson for approval, second by Dr. Weber. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Thank you very much. It passes, which takes us down to item number 12, as legal counsel. Mr. Adams.
The only issue I have is a normal report, contracts that were under 500,000, posted on your portal. The list was 36 for the month of March.
Okay. And we'll take care of legal, which would take us down to close. You heard Mr. Early mention he has an item for closed. We also will have to consider some privileges. There being no other discussion at this time, we will take about a 10-minute recess and then reconvene in closed session. Let's go ahead,
Before we do, Mr. Chair, for the purposes of our guests, you all stay as long as you want. You can stay here the rest of the day. But when we come back from closed, there won't be anything in closed that we'll need approval for or any other items. So if you want to come back to hear the gavel crack, you can do that, but I want to be kind to y'all and let you know that there isn't anything else after this, but we'd be happy to see your smiling faces. So y'all stay if you want.
Robert, with this board, you say there may not be We will now reconvene in open session at 2:50. Thank y'all very much, and I think the first item of business, Dr. Schrader?
Yeah, as discussed in closed session, for consideration of this board, the credentialing packet from our medical staff credentialing activity.
I recommend that you approve the proposal as stated by Dr. Schrader.
I have a motion by Dr. Weber, a second by Mr. Zimmerman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you very much. Is there any other business to come before the board? There being none, we stand adjourned. Thank you.